Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be talking about the books that I read in 2021. I know this video is super late. You'll probably be seeing this in like February, but I kept putting it off, procrastinating, and I don't know, just not getting it done. But we're here now. And throughout the video, I'll be looking down a lot because I keep track of what I read on my Bookstagram. So excuse that. So let's just get started. So the first book that I read in 2021 was The Plague by Albert Camus. And here it is. I don't think it's gonna zoom. It's not gonna focus, but if you're not familiar with Albert Camus, he was, a lot of his writings were really huge. I think he wrote The Myth of Sisyphus, and he also wrote The Stranger, which I did read, and it's a very a very popular book when it comes to existentialism and epistemology and things like that. But this one in particular was really interesting. So it takes place in this town, and from the point of view of someone who is not specified right away, but you find out later, and I guess there are kind of clues to help you figure it out along the way, but it's not super obvious. And there are all these little there are these phenomena that occur, and it kind of just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs until basically they're in this, I guess, pandemic. And like people are dying and there are like rats around and stuff like that. And I think, maybe I picked this up because I kind of wanted to hear or see like what Albert Camus' fictional or fictitious take on, something similar to what we're going through right now would be. I think it's interesting to see like what an author might have predicted something like this to look like, or how they would predict it to unfold, especially at a time that is like way before our time. So I think my thought process in picking this up was, what does Albert Camus say? What can I learn about this novel that, could either be reflected in or maybe help me learn about what is going on in the world today? And it was really interesting. And it does kind of get a little personal. So it's not only about like the town and what the town is going through at a macro level. It also gets into like the narrator's relationships with the people that he interacts with. So yeah, that was the first book that I read. The second book that I read in 2021, I don't have it because it's from the library. So I'm gonna try to show it like on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. We're gonna have to get this to work. Oh wait, is that? Okay, so I don't know what happened. I think I accidentally stopped recording, but we're back. So the second book that I read this year is called The First 5 Pages. I don't think I'll be able to show it directly from my phone because I can't get it to focus, but you could just, how do I get this to, and see, I think the glare too. Okay, there you go. There you go. There you go. Okay. The First 5 Pages. So yeah, this book was about writing. And if you don't know, I am a writer. I consider myself to be a writer because I write. I'm not a professional, and it's not my full-time gig yet, but I do like to write. This book was really helpful in just kind of understanding how strong the first 5 pages of a manuscript needs to be. And it's not limited to the first 5 pages, of course. Your entire manuscript should be strong and well written and really capture the attention of the reader, but also just be structurally sound. And this book just kind of gave tips basically on like how to do that. Yeah, and it kind of, Oh yeah. And it goes through things just like related to the querying process and just the editing process. Basically all of like the technical stuff that also goes into writing. Because even though writing seems to be like a very like fun, and maybe at times it seems kind of easy, you just have an idea, you just put it down on paper, and while like that's partially true, it's not entirely true. There's a lot of technicality that goes into it, and so this is a good book for like kind of honing in on your skills, reflecting on maybe areas that you need to work on as a writer, and it was really short and easy to get through too. Okay, the next book that I read. So this book is quite unusual for me to read because it's just not my typical genre. It doesn't really fall under what I would normally read. And it was actually recommended to me when I went to a bookstore, and I was just looking through this section just out of curiosity. And it was recommended to me and I got it and I loved it. So this book is called Beach Read by Emily Henry. I think you can see it pretty well. New York Times bestseller. I was going to say that I think it was a pretty popular book. And yeah, so New York Times bestseller, pretty recent book as well. Like I think a lot of what I read is usually not written within the last like 5 years or so. I don't know why. I think it's because, a lot of the books that I have tend to be a little bit older, and then when I go to the library is not usually going to have like as new books as you would get at a bookstore, like a new bookstore. But anyways, this was a great read. It was very entertaining, and while I was reading it, it felt like I was watching a movie, which is always great. And it's one of the reasons why I think I fall back to Stephen King a lot, which I did read some of his work last year. But this is my first time reading anything by Emily Henry, and I don't think it's her debut album. I don't think it's her debut novel, so I do think she has other works that I should check out. But this was this is a romance. This is a romance novel. And you know, the protagonist is a woman. She's a young woman. She's a writer. And the person that she is like, you know, that the romantic element gets involved in, he is also a writer, and she moves in like, I don't think next door, but like in the same town as him. And of course he's like emotionally unavailable, and you know, they like hate each other in the beginning. It's really cute, really entertaining. And I think this kind of opened me up more to like reading romance novels because it wasn't super corny and it was truly entertaining. Her writing style is very active. And I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all that I can really say. And it has a happy ending. So I guess it kind of starts off a little bit sad, but you know, ends up being happy, which is nice. Always nice for the main character to end up being happy. It's what we want. Okay, so the next book I read it's called The New Rules of Marketing and PR. I'll try to show this again. And you know what? I kind of don't even want to focus because I'm gonna mess it up. Let's try. Can you see? Okay. By David Meerman Scott. Okay. So this book took me a while to read. I think, you know, some books aren't meant to be read from cover to cover like novels usually are. And I think that was kind of the mistake that I made with this one. Because, well, for one, it's about 10 years old. And things like marketing and anything really related to the internet just changes quickly over time. So I think for one, it was a little outdated. He still mentions MySpace. I have no experience with MySpace. And I think part of what took me so long to get through it is, you know, some sections kind of cross over or relate to other sections. So it might be easier to just go through the table of contents, figure out what you need or what you're interested in, go straight there and read that as opposed to reading the entire thing. I do think there is some value to be gained from reading it cover to cover, especially if you have no experience at all with marketing or PR. Like, I think it's maybe a good place to start. I do like that there are a lot of examples of like companies and influencers and people who have used these strategies, or who maybe even began the strategy in a way, like started it. I think that was really interesting because I think sometimes not having a real world example makes it hard to really like anchor like advice like that, and understanding like, well, why should I, you know, have a marketing campaign that is tailored around videos for this product, like things like that. So yeah, I don't know if I would recommend this book. I think it really just depends on like what you're looking for. You might not need it. I feel like if you're around my age group, like if you're in like your early 20s, or like teens or something, you probably don't need a book like that to really market yourself. Like if you're trying to be an influencer, maybe things differ for like if you're trying to sell like a specific product. But I guess there's not really a conclusion that I have on this book, honestly. Like it was fine, I guess. So the next book that I read is called The Gift of Fear: Survival Signals That Protect Us from Violence by Gavin de Becker. Here it is. Okay. Yes. Whew. Okay. This was a good book. I really wish that I'd read this sooner, just because this is something that I think everyone should read. It really kind of gets into like why you should trust your instinct at times. Like sometimes you're able to like sense when something is off, or when someone or some situation is dangerous, and you might put it off because, well, I know I do this. I might put it off because I don't have like a clear sense of what's wrong. Like I can't articulate what is wrong, but I feel that something is wrong. This kind of goes into not only why you should trust that, but like what might actually be wrong that you're not picking up on consciously, but you might be picking up on subconsciously, and how helpful like our intuition can be. It reminds me a little bit of a book that I read. I'm pretty sure it was by Malcolm Gladwell, and it just kind of touches on why our instinct and why our intuition is so important, and how it's not just random, how we don't just feel things randomly, and like sometimes we are picking up on subconscious signals that could save us or help us in tremendous ways. But you know, and I think he also, you know, part of the point of this book also is just to help you fine tune that. So most of us already have like at least some level of intuitive signaling from the world. But sometimes what we do have is not enough, because we might not pay attention to it, or there might be things that we don't even register as like potential signs of danger. So he kind of tries to like teach us what some of those signs might be, and even some like false signals. So I think an interesting part of this was he talks about like threats, and how like some threats you should be worried about and others you probably shouldn't be, and how like the verbiage of a threat, or like how the person like acts while threatening you, can like really determine whether or not you should be worried, which is really interesting. If you know me, you might have been thinking, well, where's the Stephen King book? She went all of 2021 without reading anything by Stephen King? Wrong, I did not. Here it is. So I reread Cujo by Stephen King, and it was better the second time around. He truly is the king of horror. So yeah, so the first time I read this book, I enjoyed it and I was like, oh my gosh, it reads like a movie. I'm watching a movie as I read this. The second time I read it, you know, I did a lot of my own writing earlier in the year of 2021, and then I did reading about writing. And so picking this back up, you know, not only did it read like a movie again, but I, you know, and also like not that it's a difficult read at all, like anyone can read this, but I still could understand like his artistic decisions better, the structure of it a lot better. For whatever reason, I felt like I could retain earlier information and like connect dots even better, and like this is why he wrote this way, and you know what I mean? So I think I was able to enjoy it a lot better. And then it's not a crime to reread books that you enjoyed. I honestly think that sometimes, a lot of times, and this is proof of that, it's better the second time around. And maybe not this year, but maybe another year I'll read it again because I enjoyed it so much, and it'll be better the third time around. There's also things that you pick up on the second time around that you didn't pick up on the first time around. Not that it was like hidden or anything, but you pay attention to different things the first time versus the second time. So yeah, the next book that I read, or really this one is more like the next book that I finished, because I started it much earlier than I finished it. And this is called Daring Greatly. Okay, it's not gonna, whatever. By Brene Brown, and she's a really popular person. She did a TED Talk, and I think it must have been the same title as this, but I don't think I saw the TED Talk. I read the book, which is really good, and it goes into vulnerability. And this is something that my counselor actually recommended to me. She talks about why we should be vulnerable, when we should be vulnerable, with who we should be vulnerable, what does vulnerability even mean, why it takes courage to be vulnerable. And it's just a really good book, I would say. I do think it's a little longer than it might need to be, but honestly, depending on who you are, what you need from this, maybe it's not, because maybe some of the sections that I felt like I didn't really need, someone else might need them. But yeah, I mean, I think it was a pretty easy read. You know, books like this, sometimes I'm like, am I reading this or is this reading me? Because, child, I had a lot to work on. But yeah, pretty straightforward. I think some of the eye openers were just, you know, things that you don't think you need to learn or be told. Like, this should be obvious, but it's not obvious unless you are literally taught them. So things just like, why is vulnerability necessary? Well, that's how you connect with other people, and people need other people in their lives because we can't exist in a vacuum. But you also like don't need to be vulnerable to like literally everyone. People have to earn that from you. It's really interesting. Yeah, and I think I might consider reading some of her other books as well. Maybe this year, we'll see. Okay, the next book that I read, I don't have with me because it was from the library, but it's called Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Seeking BFF by Rachel Birch. Got it? Okay. All right, so she is a young adult, moved to Chicago with her husband, and she's trying to make friends because she left all of her friends behind. And, you know, when you're in your 20s, it's really weird. Like, trying to make friends, like, where do you go to make friends? Like, usually you meet friends of your friends, but sometimes that's not always possible, like if you're in a new place or something. And so I thought it was really interesting, like the journey that she goes through in making friends. And like she tries to have like one friend date a week, like meet a new person every week. And she succeeds and she does actually make friends. But of course, like making a best friend takes a long time. You're not gonna just like meet someone twice and like you guys are like best friends. Unless maybe like you guys are soulmates, I guess, and like you both are on the same page with that. But I kind of agree with her in that it'll take time. But she also like gives it great advice about like how to make friends. What is a friend? The different types of friends. What kinds of friend dates you can go on, and like she talks about the good and the bad and like how she connects with some people and she doesn't with other people, why she connects with some people and why she doesn't connect with other people. And it's just like, wow, like this is really interesting. It inspired me to kind of stay in touch with my friends, not that I wasn't already, but also kind of gave me a push to like maybe go out there and make some friends, which is really hard. And I didn't do really, but it's still interesting, and I still enjoyed reading about her journey in doing that. Okay, the next book that I read is called Year One. Boom. Okay, so some context. I graduated from college in May of 2021, and you know, this book is proof that I am not the only one that has experienced an existential crisis from this transition in life. And this book goes through like being a young professional and like managing that transition in life. And just like, I don't know, for me personally, of course, I was excited to graduate college, but I was also really, really anxious. And I felt like I didn't know who I was if I wasn't a student at that time, because that's all I've ever been. All my life, I've been a student. And so, you know, I'm aware of, I don't remember what philosopher said it, but, you know, you're the author of your own life kind of thing. Like you decide like who you are, you decide what your life looks like, blah, blah, blah. And I totally believed that, but I was also like really stressed out about like, what do I want? You know, what do I want my life to look like? How do I get there? I feel so much better now, a few months later. But this book was really helpful in assuring me that I am not alone and giving advice on how to navigate certain things, like work, which is also really different because this is my first full-time job. Full-time salaried job. And it's different and it's weird, and I feel like now I'm pretty adjusted, but it took a while to get here, like a little bit longer than I was hoping that it would, because I don't know, with school, you're just kind of used to the structure that already exists, and you just go from grade to grade to grade, or from year to year, to class, and everything makes sense. Everything is structured for you. Just do your best, get good grades, and you're good to go. But this is different. Work, real life, adulthood, is different. You're not constantly being graded unless you're grading yourself. And so the expectations are often unspoken, and I don't know, like the scale, what is the scale? There is no scale unless you make your own scale. And it's like, what do people do after work? I don't know. What do people eat? I don't know. There's all these things that I was just like, you know, I don't know what to do with my life. But I feel better now, and it really does kind of boil down to developing a routine and making your own decisions. Like, quite literally, you are the author of your own life, the artist of your life. It really can be whatever you want it to be, and I find a lot of freedom in that now, a few months in. But yeah, there's that. Okay, the next book I read it's called Creative Writing by Diane Doubtfire. I don't know if you can see it. It's fine. As the title suggests, this book is about creative writing. It's not limited to writing novels and short stories. It actually touches on a lot of stuff, even like nonfiction writing, like journal entries, radio, things like TV, things like that. And it kind of just goes through like all these different types of writing and like what goes into it, like what differentiates that kind of writing from another type of writing. So how is a novel different from a short story? How is a piece of radio writing different from other kinds of writing? So this book, I would say, is good for someone who maybe is interested in writing and doesn't know what kind of writing they want to do, or has a message to give but doesn't know what form they'd like to give it in, or what form would best fit that message or that story. So it was good. It doesn't get too far into any particular type of writing because there are so many ones that it touches on. Okay, and the next book I read was Blockade Billy by Stephen King. So you can kind of see it. Yeah, I'm not zooming in anymore. Too much work. But this was a good one. This was like a novelette. Oh, no, this was a novella. Wow, I messed that up. It was really short. It took me about an hour to read. It's very heavy on like baseball jargon. I don't know anything about baseball, but I was still able to enjoy the story because some of it is like you kind of understand what's going on just from like other context, and really like the baseball part is, I mean, somewhat important. I think it helps with like imagery if you understand what's going on, but you don't need it really to at least somewhat enjoy the story because it was still good. I will say that this was different from what I expected from Stephen King in the sense that it wasn't very like spooky. I mean, I guess it was a little bit unsettling, like the ending, what you find out at the end. But it wasn't like, oh, a scary clown, or like this thing is haunted. It wasn't anything like that, but it was good, I guess. It was good. Okay. Next, I read Stephen Hawking, Quest for a Theory of Everything. Stephen Hawking, Quest for a Theory of Everything by Katie Ferguson. And like I said, I am not doing the zoom in thing. But this, oh my gosh, this was a great book. I don't even know why I picked it up. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, I have no background in like physics or anything like that. I took a physics class or two in high school, but that was because I had to, you know what I mean? And I did not learn anything from that class, unfortunately. I don't know how I passed it. I think there was like a major curve. But anyway, this was really interesting because I was familiar with the name Stephen Hawking. I had no idea like what he really did. I just knew his name. I've heard of him. This kind of goes into his life and stuff like that. It's kind of like a biography, although I guess he doesn't talk a whole lot about his life, so there's only like so much to like really say. So a lot of it is about his actual work in physics. And so, you know, before I finish on this book, I have to bring up the next book that I read because it relates, they're connected, which is A Brief History of Time by him, Stephen Hawking, as you can see. And the book about his life references his book a lot because that's where he, I guess, it's like a conglomerate of like a lot of the stuff that he does, a lot of the work that he did. And basically like he kind of goes into like quantum theory and stuff. Okay, he talks about like electrons and protons and stuff, like the universe at a really, really tiny scale, but also the universe at like the biggest scale. So talking about like planets and like black stars and like things like that. I think one of my favorite parts of like reading this book or these books was finally understanding what a black hole is. It's not as complicated as it sounds as far as like just basic definition. And it's basically like the whole point of like A Brief History of Time and the whole like discussion of physics, both at the really micro level and the macro level, is trying to find like one equation to explain the universe, I guess. A theory. One theory to explain the entire universe, which is interesting. And basically the conclusion that was reached is that there's so much more to discover and so much more to understand. And it seems like although there are a lot of things being discovered, I don't think we'll ever have, personally, I don't think we'll ever have like one theory to describe everything because there's so much to consider. So this was a really complex book. For A Brief History of Time, I read it through one time and there were definitely parts that were really hard and it took a little bit longer to really finish. And then I went back and like I kind of like skimmed it again, and that's when I really was able to like connect a lot of the dots. Just because a lot of it is hard, especially when you're not familiar with like physics stuff. But I will say that I do recommend this to anyone, especially if you're into any of that kind of stuff. And then I read The Art of Possibility. By Rosamund Stone Zander and Benjamin Stander. This was a really positive and optimistic book. Probably one of the most positive books I've ever read. But it took me a while to kind of get through it. It's a very interesting format, I would say. It's not like just, you don't just read it straight through, I would say. But still, I did get a lot from it. It talks a lot about how the framework with which you view the world, in which you interpret things, how that influences basically your entire life. So the way, like the way you choose to think about things has a big influence on the possibilities that you allow yourself to have, or the possibilities that you allow yourself to take advantage of, or the limitations that you might be placing on yourself simply from how you view yourself and how you view your connection to the world, or your role in the world. If you view the world through a lens of scarcity, well then there will be scarcity in your life. But if you understand that the possibilities are endless, then the possibilities will be endless. And you'll be surprised at what you'll be able to do and accomplish. Next book I read, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. This is a great book. I wish I'd read this earlier. It really does give time-tested methods for conquering worry. It's good. This is a book that, so I've listened to like Earl Nightingale recordings, and he and Dale Carnegie, who wrote this book, he writes the way Earl Nightingale sounds. I think they're from like similar time periods. And I don't even know if that makes sense, but like it makes sense to me. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. There's really good advice in here on how to stop worrying. And I think one of the biggest things, and you hear it from other people as well, is to live day by day. Focus on today. Don't focus on tomorrow, because you'll be stressed out about tomorrow and probably stressed out about whatever stresses you out today as well. Like you're just doubling your stress. So just worry about one day at a time. And then also the things that you are worried about, like think about why you're worried about them and like what benefit is it to worry about them? Is it something that you can solve or work on? Because if so, just work on it and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And then if it's not, well, there's nothing you can do about it anyway, so why worry, I guess. But yeah, so this was a great book, especially if you are someone who does worry a lot, or you just kind of want to strengthen your art of not worrying. He definitely gives a lot of things to like think about and to like incorporate maybe as exercises or as thought practices. And he gives like anecdotes of people that he knew that gave him these stories. Some of them are really famous, and if you go to like the back of the book, a section called True Stories, it's just all story after story after story of like people conquering worry. And that was probably my favorite part of the book, because I love hearing success stories. And I mean, this isn't necessarily, they're not all necessarily like huge success stories, like rags to riches stories, but they are success stories in a sense, because they conquered worry. And in that sense, they were successful. So yeah, that's everything that I read in 2021. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry for it being so late. I'll try to make 2022's video at a more reasonable time. But yeah, and as far as what I'll be reading in 2022, so I already started, of course, it's about February now, so I definitely started reading things. But I do think that throughout the rest of the year, maybe the second half of the year, I really want to get into Pulitzer Prize winners specifically. I have been very curious about what qualifies a book to be a Pulitzer Prize winner. Like, what is so special about them? And I feel like I haven't read enough of them to understand what the distinguishing qualities could possibly be. So one of my goals for 2022 is to read several Pulitzer Prize winners and just to, I don't know, gain some perspective. But I'm not stopping there. I also want to get more into like econ. Like I want to read some books that are like econ focused, maybe even physics, because the Stephen Hawking stuff, even though it's hard for me to articulate what I really learned, I did learn a lot and it really piqued my interest. So that's probably what I'll be getting into this year. Let me know if you have any book suggestions for me. Let me know if you've read anything that I mentioned and what you thought of it, or if you are thinking about reading anything that I mentioned. I am very curious to hear. And yeah, have a great year, you guys. Bye.